you have to know your audience. You have to build that audience. No matter where the streaming comes from. You still have everything on streaming. But if you don't know your audience, you can't segment, you can't build on that. You can't really grow.
Absolutely. When content is shared across multiple platforms and partners, who actually owns it, and why does that even matter?
So as far as the content, as it relates to sports, the sports like the NFL, the NHL, those entities typically have the essential rights in those sports, right? But to the extent that you start streaming, right, and there are different people taking, images and filming the sports, the streaming services or their related entities own those broadcasts specifically. But what we're seeing with that, and as things develop from an intellectual property perspective, is that a lot of the licensing deals will actually have the rights of the streaming platforms revert back to, for example, the NHL, the NFL, after a period of time.
Which makes adding the correct arbitration clause into the contract the most relevant thing you can do. All these business people keep on negotiating all the terms and then the prices to be paid for each of these rights. But then if you don't have the correct clause, then you do have a right, but you have nowhere to enforce it. And then you don't even know where. So
yeah, and then people do arbitration, and outside of the Warner Brothers or NBA, we don't have a single actual dispute. Get us some content. Go to the court. Give us a little bit of a precedent going.
Well, this is why arbitration works. Yes. Just having the arbitration. So basically, for all newbies or people that don't know exactly what arbitration is you take your matter into a private courthouse. Why do I say it's a private courthouse? It's because you decide the substantive law that you want to apply to the contract. You decide also where you want to seek the arbitration. That means which forum is going to decide on the procedures, and then if you can have access to, let's say, emergency arbitrator. If you have some carve-outs in your contract, let's say you're seated in Miami, but you carve it out. Maybe the Florida courts can help you, and you can have a temporary relief injunction, and that matters because let's say your FIFA rights to broadcast these soccer teams, you don't have 5 weeks, you just have these 2 hours. So you need to be able to act fast, and then arbitration gives you that. But usually what they use is boilerplate, so they don't get that.
And with content moving so quickly online, how big of an issue is unauthorized use of piracy, and what can actually be done about it?
I can speak to that. I many years ago, so I know I'm from a family of artists, and my godfather died of HIV/AIDS when I was 11 years old. 30 years later, this is it was 1989. In 2009, my uncle in France found a VHS tape of his last performance. Took that VHS tape, put it in a DVD with my tech background, and I was able to make an album with it, and I did some pretty cool stuff with it. Posted it on YouTube. But before I did post it on YouTube, went to copyright.gov, made sure that it was protected. And somebody reposted the video, and I had to do a cease and desist type of thing. And so you have to, and I shout out to Rebecca, I speak to her frequently about just owning your content, and if you're a content creator, copyright is the first thing you need to do. Even, doesn't matter how fast the content moves, you have to move faster. You have to be proactive, like you said before, because there will be people out there, no matter how big or small, that will take your content and try and repurpose it. So you have to be very careful and move faster than the content is moving itself.
Dora, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to say that basically now what we're seeing these days is the most sophisticated players. What they're doing now is that they treat legal infrastructure as like legal drag, and then they're not being like, oh my god, it's gonna cost too much. Let's do all of that, organize an international team, understand their markets, to try to move as fast as
In today's streaming environment, what makes sports content actually hold value?
Can I revert back to
Yes,
that
absolutely.
question just briefly?
For sure.
I just wanted to add something from a patent perspective related to piracy. The one thing that we're seeing in the patent world is there's a race to protect the patents that can, prevent the piracy issues. And so think about, what's one of the most successful streaming platforms? Netflix, right? Everyone here knows Netflix and has seen Netflix. And isn't Netflix like one of the most user-friendly experiences as opposed to the other platforms? Guess what? That's because of patents. And it's because of various patents that they have. And it also goes to piracy type issues and other issues. But I just wanted to bring that up because this is an emerging area that we're seeing as well in streaming.
Okay, thank you for that. And back to my question, so what is it about the sports content that makes it hold value within the whole streaming realm?
I can give a little bit of perspective on that. We actually have a question, if anything that we want to raise.
We'll be taking questions at the end.
But as far as the live content with sports and its value, I think the main offering point here for sports is its live nature, right? People want to tune into sports when they're happening. People want to know who's going to win. You don't have that capability. Delay, but it's a little bit less interesting because by then Twitter has already told you, right? If you want. So that's where the value of live advertising comes in. That's where the value of those ads that are associated with Super Bowl come in, right? In the same way, that's where the value of the ads on the side screen for a piracy website, that's where that comes in as well, because people also go there when they can't access, the 10 different subscriptions that they now need in order to get connected to every single one of the NFL games, for instance. So the more, coming back to the more segmentation, I guess in this instance, unnecessary segmentation, or maybe necessary for the kind of bottom line, but less so for the user experience, the leagues take on, the more likely people are to go and find that, single place where they can find anything, and that's, me being Russian, I got links for you.
And as recent as yesterday, we're even seeing deals where Amazon has partnered with Duke University to exclusively stream games. Now, this was just yesterday. What does that say about where sports is headed? Because this is actually Amazon's first time partnering in college sports. We've seen professional, but now it's college. So what does that say about where streaming is heading?
I can't really speak to that, but what I could say, yesterday I had, where in terms of streaming is heading, you have to start early, right? You have to, I'll speak about the content space. I have a young man that did his final pitch yesterday about how he was an athlete that didn't get a chance to create his own reel, right? And so he was able to start his own business to create reels for younger athletes. So the streaming is starting younger and younger and younger, and Amazon already sees that. There's an issue with this because the younger they are, the more lawyers they need, because now who owns the right? The end name, image, and likeness. It's a very scary space when Amazon keeps going younger and younger. So that's my take on it. But we have to, it's an interesting space. That's all I can say about that.
As far as their motivation, the streaming services, why they want to go into live sports, it's about user acquisition. What are the platforms fighting for? They want to have users maintain their memberships, maintain their subscriptions as much as possible. They don't want people dropping. That's the numbers at the end of the year that they're bringing to the shareholders to say that they're successful or not as a management team. Oh, we were able to get more subscribers or retain more subscribers. And live sports does that for you. If you know as a live sports fan, that you're going to get your favorite team in the playoffs or whatever it is, here available on this streaming service, you're going to tune in, and then you're not going to cancel most likely. That's the reason why Netflix had the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight on it, right? That was one of its first, sponsorship kind of activities as far as live sports events goes. And the reason for it was because people tuned in and then signed up and then didn't cancel the subscription. And now it still goes on. So.
I love that you said that. What would you say is one mistake that organizations make when it comes to owning or structuring their content rights?
I would say treating their their contracts, focusing on everything else but the dispute resolution. I think they have to assume that the content is not gonna. It's all gonna be international, and it's all gonna be global and not territorially bound. And then so they need to think that the protection and the protecting mechanisms need to be weaved in with protective clause in the contracts.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think that they have to be very proactive with their protection. Like you were just saying, before releasing it, you got that copyright registration, or before releasing your potentially patentable idea, getting that patent application filed. Something that's really interesting in the patent world that we're seeing with streaming. Who's ever heard of the first sale doctrine? Have you ever heard that? So like if you buy a DVD, right? You can go, if you buy a DVD, can't you go and just give the DVD to your friend? Right? You're free to do that, right? But that doesn't exist on a streaming platform because you don't have that bundle of rights that you purchase like that. But what if you decide to take those, if you decide to record on your whatever, some of those streaming things, whose rights are those?
But I think that touches like an even more interesting question, which is how do we define property? Like the fact that this is the 21st century, so now property rights used to be linked to something like I own this phone. Now they're shifting and it's more user access. This is why you get a membership on an app, you get like different...
And them limiting that membership now as well with shared accounts.
Shared accounts, and then so basically it becomes like a world where you don't need to own, you lease everything, you use everything. So that's a very interesting sorry, that's a little bit over the panel,
But if you want to be able
Thank you for
to
that.
then lease things to people, you need to own things in order to be able to lease them. So your whole business model of licensing things to people, right, is dependent on you properly setting up ownership.
Because that's what's happening. Because I saw it the other day, there's a class action lawsuit against Amazon and Apple. Because anybody how many of us download things, if you buy digital movies online, you technically don't own it. You're leasing it.
yes.
And so it's that user access that we're paying for, and they could snatch it right back. So now my kids now want to buy the DVDs if they're still available. My son saw a VHS tape at my mother-in-law's. He's like, "Look at the media, Dad. Look at how the media was before." I'm like, "Yeah, you kind of own that. It's yours, to be able to have access to." And things are changing. So.
It's a shift it's definitely a shift in the law, but I think like it's a different kind of property right.
And I think it's always interesting because we always say the wheels of justice spin so slowly, and it does. It takes the law, and I'm sure you've seen that from an international perspective, quite some time to catch up to the realities of the technology.
And what's becoming more important today that maybe wasn't as important 5 or 10 years ago within this digital and streaming space?
Entrepreneurship. It's entrepreneurship. The ability to understand how what you create you can own, right? Understanding how the law works to protect that. And so people are now thinking of themselves, going back to the very, very first panel, Rebecca says in that line from Jay-Z, even Jay-Z is re-releasing his music after 30 years. Because now he owns his music. He owns what he created. So I'm sort of being biased, but before I was a professor of entrepreneurship, I always understood that you have to own what you create. And so those going back to the segmentation, the little niche spaces makes you rich, right? And so those with entrepreneurial principles understand how to navigate to an ever-changing space. No matter what the technology is, you know what you own, you know what you can do with what you own, and you keep growing and building from there.
Yeah, I would echo ownership, exactly on what you said.
And bringing it back to the sports space, where do you see the biggest opportunities within sports media over the next few years?
would say that as an enjoyer of sports media, as far as digital versions thereof go, I think there's been a significant slant towards creator-led media as opposed to legacy-led media, where before you used to have ESPN or TNT to come in and get your basketball takes or NFL takes or whatever else. Now you can go to 50 different creators on YouTube that have a different angle, have an ability to deliver things. And some of those creators do actually end up executing deals with larger enterprises such as Bleacher Report, by default, parent company Report, that was just part of this